If you want to capture the absolute best, most cinematic looking footage with the Osmo Action 6, doing so may sound intimidating and complicated, but today I'm going to break down the entire process for you and I'm going to simplify it. And by the end of this video, you're going to be a pro at capturing incredible footage with your Action 6. And make sure to stick around because I do have some absolutely free LUTs that you can download to color grade your footage later on, and it's going to make it much easier for you. So today I'm going to talk about the tools, the settings, and the editing that you need to do to create that incredible finished product. So first of all, there are two tools that you'll need. The first is a gimbal. And there are two gimbals that I recommend depending on if you want the budget-friendly gimbal or the little bit nicer gimbal that also works with other cameras. The budget-friendly gimbal is the Hohem iSteady Pro 4. And this gimbal has a payload limit of about 160 grams, and you can only use this with action cameras. But the good thing is it's super easy to mount a camera on here, and this gimbal costs less than $100. But it is very basic, it's very budget friendly, nothing fancy. The other gimbal I recommend if you want to splurge and pay a little bit more is the Fiutech Scorp Mini 3 Pro. And the nice thing about this gimbal is not only can you use action cameras on it, but you can use your smartphone. You can use a mirrorless or DSLR camera with a lens, provided it's not over the payload limit of a couple pounds. And the second tool you're going to need is you're going to need a set of ND filters. My favorites are these right here from Freewell, and I have both the standard kit and the kit with polarizers. Now both of these serve a slightly different purpose. The ones with the polarization are great on a bright, sunny day where you want to limit some of that light pollution. But if it's a day like today where it's kind of overcast and cold and snowy, the standard day pack works great. And all the samples I'm showing you in the video today were filmed using the standard day pack of ND filters. So next, let's talk about the settings that you need to capture that cinematic footage. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to select an ND filter. So this pack from Freewell has an ND8, ND16, ND32, and ND64. Now on a day like today, it is overcast, but with all of this snow, it is still fairly bright. So I'm going to select an ND32, and I'm going to mount it on the Action 6. Our ND32 is this one right here, and mounting it on the Action 6 is really easy. This is just going to go over top of the existing lens cover. So you don't have to remove the lens cover, anything like that. All you gotta do is pop it on securely, and once it's on, it's gonna look like that. And by the way, I haven't had any problems with these falling off. These have stayed quite secure. But in a moment, I'm going to show you how to know which ND filter to use so that you select the correct one each and every time. So now that we've got our ND filter on, we're going to go to video mode right here, and we are going to key in the key settings. So first thing you want to do is you want to go down here to the bottom. Now my recommendation for the cinematic footage is to do 4K 4:3 in 30 frames per second. The reason I recommend 30 is it is very versatile, and if you're filming in 30 frames per second with the shutter speed I'm gonna show you in a moment, chances are you're not going to get that flicker from lights like you could if you do 24 frames per second. With that being said, 24 is also a perfectly good frame rate for cinematic footage. And the reason for the 4:3 is you're going to have some extra resolution at the top and the bottom that later on, if you want to pan or do a little bit of cropping, you're going to have that extra footage. But if you don't want to, you can just drop it onto a 16:9 aspect ratio timeline, and you're not going to see the extra footage, it's just going to center it. And if you do want to do any type of slow motion, then I recommend doing 4K 4:3 60 with those scenes. I have a few scenes in these samples here where I did that, and I'll tell you later how to adjust the shutter speed for that as well. And then up here in the upper right, we want to have rock steady turned on, but we just want to do basic rock steady. Because we have our gimbal, we do not need anything more powerful for stabilization. Rock steady is going to be more than enough. And then when it comes to the lens focal length, I recommend two options. I recommend standard D-warp or the natural wide. I personally have taken a liking to the natural wide on here. I find it's really good. It has that nice widescreen while also not distorting. And by the way, up here at the top where it says aspect ratio, the default there is fine, but if you want to do the custom, it's going to use the entirety of that square sensor. So if you want to do that so that you have footage where you can do a vertical and a horizontal later on, make sure to do the custom. It's not going to change any of the other settings I'm going to show you today, but it is going to give you a little bit more flexibility in post if you do that. And that's what it's going to look like on your screen when you're recording. But later on, when you drop it on your timeline, you're going to be able to do a lot of different things with that. So after you've keyed in those settings right there, we're going to go back to the main screen and we're going to click over here on the right. And this is where the magic is going to happen with these settings. So first of all, make sure Pro is yellow here. If Pro's not turned on, it's going to look like that, and you're not going to be able to unlock the key settings that we need to. So click Pro there, and then first of all, up here for exposure, it's going to start off as auto, but you want to go here and you want to click M. M represents manual. First thing we want to do is we want to take the ISO range right here, and we want to do 100 to 800. And I'll explain in a moment why we don't want a static ISO. After we've set the ISO range to 100 to 800, we're gonna go over here to the shutter speed, and if you're doing 30 frames per second, you're going to toggle that to 1/60. And the reason we're doing 1/60 is that is the 180-degree shutter angle, and what that's going to do is it's going to give you really nice, natural feeling motion blur in your footage. It's going to have that cinematic look and feel to it, and it's going to look extra appealing to your audience. But this is also why we need the gimbal right here. Because anytime the shutter speed is below about 1/200 on action cameras, that electronic image stabilization, which Rocksteady is one instance of that, it's going to create jitter in your footage if you are moving and your shutter speed's slower than that. Now, if your camera's stationary like this, you obviously don't need it on a gimbal because your camera's not moving and shaking. You're not gonna have the micro jitters. But if you are moving with your camera and you're using these slow shutter speeds, you do need to have a gimbal, otherwise your footage is not going to look good. And if you chose 24 frames per second, you'll want to do your shutter speed of 1/50. And if you're filming in that 60 frames per second, you want to do your shutter speed of 1/120. So basically that second number should always be double your frames per second or as close to it as possible. Now, if you look up here, the EV, we don't have to touch that. That is going to just simply tell you what your exposure is. Right now, we're at that perfect 0.0. But don't worry if that fluctuates anywhere between plus or minus 0.3 or even plus or minus 0.7. As long as it's not outside of that range, you are good. What we really want to pay attention to is the ISO value up here. Now currently you can see that's about 237. It's bouncing around a little bit, but that is good. In general, we want to see that ISO stay between 100 and 400. If you get it bumping up against 100 and your EV value is saying plus 0.7 or more, that means you need a stronger ND filter. So in this case, we would put on ND64 instead of ND32. But if the opposite scenario is happening and your ISO is above 400 and your EV value is at negative 0.7 or below, that means your ND filter on here is too strong and you need to go to a lower one. So if that was happening right now, we would go down to ND16 and chances are we would be set at that point. So once you've keyed in these settings, you're gonna hit the check mark. You're good to go with the exposure. Next setting here is the white balance. And it's gonna start off at auto, but you wanna click M. You wanna have a static white balance. If you were filming during the day, set it to 5600K. If you're filming at sunrise or sunset, set it to 6500K. And if you happen to be filming at nighttime, you don't need an ND filter unless you're in a really bright city area, but set your white balance to 3800K for that footage. Color mode right here. You want to be able to grade this footage later on. You're going to be able to add some very custom, cool looks to your footage, which is where the LUTs that I've created with those different color looks come in. And when we grade this footage during the editing process later on, I'll show you a few of those and the different looks you can get for your footage. But if you want to get the very best, you want to do the D-Log-M 10-bit. And a helpful setting over here, it's going to start off in off. And you're going to see that's what your footage is going to look like out of the camera initially later on, but you want to do color recovery on. That's going to give you a fairly accurate representation of what your footage is going to look like after you grade it later on. So we're going to hit the check mark there. For the aperture, as long as you aren't vlogging with this where you need to hold it really close to your face, I recommend doing the fixed f2.6. We want to have the aperture open as wide as possible. It's going to help us get really good looking footage. But you'll notice the minimum focus distance is 40 centimeters. So you do have to keep that in mind. You don't want it too close to yourself or any other human subjects, otherwise they will be blurry and they will not be sharp and it will not look good. So if you do need to hold it close to a subject, go to the Starburst F4 mode and that's gonna take your minimum focus distance all the way down to 20 centimeters. And you, of course, can toggle between these, but if you do choose the f4, make sure to go back to exposure and make sure you're good here, because the f4 has a much tinier opening for the aperture than f2.6, and you'll see here that bumped our ISO up to 649. So in this case, if we do the aperture f4, we'll actually want to change the ND filter, most likely down to ND16. And finally, for the image adjustment, really important settings here. These are both going to start at 0, but for texture, you want to go all the way down to -2, and noise reduction, you want to go all the way down to -2 as well. This is going to give you the absolute smoothest, sharpest looking footage from this camera. And one other thing I wanted to mention is a wireless mic. So if you own one of the DJI wireless mics like I do, this is the Mic 2. If you're gonna be doing any talking and want really good audio from your Action 6, I highly recommend using one of these. This is going to give you really good sounding audio, and that is part of a good cinematic production, having that good audio. Now I powered it on, you can see right up here, it auto-connected. And if we go into the menu here, you're gonna click wireless mic, and there's a couple key settings you wanna make sure you set. The main setting here you wanna make sure you set is that 32-bit float recording. That's going to give you really good quality audio. The second setting you wanna change here is you wanna select dual audio recording. And the reason for that, when you hit record, you're gonna notice the red light come on here as well. And what that's doing is that's recording a 32-bit internal track inside your Mic 2, but it's also recording it to the video file on here. So chances are you won't need to use this track later on, but you do have it here just in case something happens between the pairing of this and the camera right here. You can sync up the audio later on. And finally, I'm gonna go back into the studio and I'm going to show you the editing process to bring out the very best in that footage. All right, so now it's time to make some magic happen with these clips. So what I have here is I have Adobe Premiere Pro, and I have 4 clips that I filmed on the Action 6 that I've imported. And I haven't done anything to these clips yet. They're in D-Log-M, but a couple things to note. One, if you're using a different video editor and you're not using Adobe Premiere Pro, that's fine. A lot of these steps are going to be exactly the same. You're just going to find some of these settings in different places depending on what editing software you use. And 2, and very important, a lot of video editing software now, it will convert your color space automatically to Rec 709. So in this case, this footage is D-Log-M, but Adobe Premiere Pro has already converted it to the Rec 709 space. If your video editing software does that, you do not need the free LUT from DJI. The LUT from DJI simply converts your footage to the color space that you need. It converts it from D-Log-M to Rec 709. If your video editing software does not do that, you will need the LUT. So the LUT I'm going to link to in the description below, but if you do need the LUT, all you have to do is in your video editing software, you're going to apply the LUT. In the case of Premiere Pro, I can go down to Creative, Look, and then I can browse, and then I can select the LUT right here. But it's really important that you don't apply the LUT to your footage unless your video editing software has not converted it. Otherwise, you're going to get super contrasty, oversaturated footage, and it's going to look really terrible. So if you're not sure if your video editing software converts to color space automatically, just do a Google search to make sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how easy it is to grade these clips, and then I'm going to show you the free LUTs that I've created, and I'm going to show you how to apply those. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get our lumetri scopes up, and we want to make sure it's set to 10-bit. In Premiere Pro, this is really easy to do. If you don't have the Scopes tab, go up here to Window, and then go down here and select Lumetri Scopes. Now our clips like this, there's a lot of room to work with. And the way you know that is nothing is going below the 0 here, and nothing is above the 100. Once any of this data here goes above 100, that means your highlights are getting blown out, and they're going to be completely white and no detail. But anytime this data goes below the 0 here, that means your shadows are too dark and they're going to be completely black. So we're gonna go over here to basic correction to start with. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first of all, up the exposure a little bit. This footage is a little bit underexposed, and that's because it was kind of an overcast day, but I still needed the ND filter to get that motion blur that I wanted. So we're gonna bring up the exposure just a little bit, right there to about 0.5. And you may or may not have to do this. Starting off, if your clip has a lot of lines up here at 80 or above, you don't need to add any exposure. You're gonna be fine there. But if your lines are down there, like where mine started around the 70 or so, you're gonna wanna add a little bit of exposure. You wanna get those to about 80 up here. The next thing we wanna do is we want to bump up the highlights a little bit. This is where we're gonna start to add that contrast. So highlights, I'm going to drag this. And of course, this particular clip, it is bright snow, but you can still see we're not clipping anything here. And I'm going to bump highlights in this clip up to right about 50. When we get them up to 50, some of the tops right here are getting close to that 90 right there. And I generally don't like to go above the 90 unless it's a clip where it benefits from that. In this case, the snow doesn't really benefit from that because it's pretty smooth here in the woods. And then the next thing we want to do to add some contrast is we want to take our shadows down a little bit. Now in this case, I want to get them down right about to the 10. So right about there at about -45 is good. And as you can see, if we reset this from where we started to now, you can see it was kind of washed out, not really a lot of contrast. But then if we go back to what we've done, we've added a lot of contrast there. And I like how that looks. Now, something we can do with this particular clip to add a little bit more contrast is we can bump up our whites a little bit. We obviously already have a lot of white in this image, but bumping up the whites is going to help a little bit further. And then we can bring down our blacks ever so slightly. But in this particular image, we don't want to go down too far. So in this case, I'm going to go to about -5.2. So after we've done that, if we look at our clip now, it's got a really good contrast there. I like how that looks. Our highlights aren't blown out and our shadows aren't too dark. So what I'm going to do now for one final step is I'm going to go down to Creative. I'm going to click on Look and I'm going to go to Browse. And I'm going to go right here to my DJI Action 6 LUTs folder. And for this particular image in the woods, it was a cold day, it was overcast, so I'm going to pick Cool. And I'm going to click Open. Now when I apply that, you can right away see it adds that really nice cool look to the woods. I love how that looks. That looks really cool. It really has that cold vibe to it. Like if you compare it to this clip after it, where things don't necessarily look cold in them, but right here it looks nice and cool. But if that LUT is a little bit too intense for you, you can adjust the intensity of the LUT. So we can put it down to 50. If you want a more subtle cool to your footage, putting it to 50 gives you that cool, but it's not that overly cool. So after you apply my LUTs to your footage, you can then, for the final step, adjust the intensity of them. And just do a double check on your scopes, make sure nothing is crossing the 100 up here in the highlights and nothing going below the 0 in the shadows. Just kind of drag through your clip. It looks good. Now clip number 2, this one was a lot of fun. I liked filming this one because I filmed this one in 60 frames per second, but then I put it on my 24 frames per second timeline, slowed it down. It's about 40% of the original speed, but it's got that nice smooth slow motion. But with this clip, there's also another opportunity here. Because I filmed it in 4:3, we can actually add a little bit of motion and panning to the clip. So let me show you what I mean here. If we go over to Effects and we drag this vertically, you can see we have extra footage there at the top and the bottom. In fact, on the bottom here, we have to be careful because my feet show in part of that footage, my feet and my legs where I was standing, and I don't want those to show. I want this clip to just be of the snow angel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back to the beginning of the clip and I'm going to frame it vertically how I want it. So I wanna start the clip right about here. And then what I wanna do is I wanna put a point for position and scale. So this is gonna be my starting point. And then I wanna play this through until the end. And then I want to set my end point. So while I pull my camera up in this clip and zoom out, I also want a little bit of motion going down vertically. So we're going to get to our final frame of this clip. And right here, I'm going to put another point and I'm going to drag this down just a little bit. So now that I've done that, if we drag through this, you can see as I pan out, it also scrolls a little bit vertically. So I have motion going on 2 different axes in this clip. So now that we've added the motion, it's time to do some contrast. So we're gonna go back here to basic correction. And first of all, we can add some exposure. So in this clip, I'm going to go up to about 0.6. I definitely want to brighten it. And as you can see here, when we go to 0.6, our highest exposure only gets up to about 70 here, so we still have plenty of room to work with. So for the highlights, I want to bring these up, and I want to get those right about to 80. I don't want to lose too much texture in the snow, but I kind of like that dreamy feel to it. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit further. And then for our shadows, we're going to bring those down a little bit to add some contrast. So that adds quite a bit of contrast right there, but I'm gonna bring up our whites just a little bit and bring down our blacks just a little bit. And then contrast, I'll bump it up slightly here. So for this particular clip, I'm going to apply a different LUT. And for this one, I'm gonna apply that Deep Cinema LUT. So I'm gonna try that out and see how it looks. So Deep Cinema may be a little bit too much for this clip, but I really like how that looks there. It just has that really good classic feel to it. So if we feel like that's too much, we can go back to 50 here. That kind of backs off a little bit on it. Also, if we decide to try a different LUT, we can go back up here and go to none. And let's try my blue and orange LUT. Now, obviously there's not a lot of orange in this clip. The little bit of orange is gonna be those skin tones, and then a little bit of the blue cools in the shadows. But when I apply that, I actually like how that looks. That looks really cool there. It's got those blues down in the snow. It's very subtle the way I designed it, so it doesn't really do a lot to skin tones. They still feel natural. And a little bit of that grass showing through right in here, kind of has that orange look, that dead grass color. So I think I'm actually gonna stick with blue and orange for this one. Really like that. And one thing you'll notice after I applied the LUT, down here, some of our shadows are completely black. So what I can do is I can go back here simply to the blacks and drag this up a little bit. And I'm gonna keep that right there at just slightly at about -0.3. That last line pulls up above 0. So that's going to help just ensure we preserve all that detail in our shadows and that we have nothing that's completely black. Love how that looks. I'm going to show you one other clip where I had the exposure set a little bit differently. That is this one right here with the tree. You can obviously see starting off, this is much brighter. And you'll notice up here, we have some of these lines that are getting up already close to the 100. So I wanted to show you this because if you have any clips starting off like this, there's not as much you have to do when grading it. So over here, first of all, for exposure, I'm not gonna add any exposure. I like how the exposure is right there. But I'm going to add a little bit of highlights here. I'm gonna do that carefully. And as you can see, when I add the highlights, it mostly affects in this range. It brings it up to above 80, but it doesn't affect the sky much. The sky isn't clipping above 100 currently. It does brighten it, but it doesn't go above 100. So for highlights, I'm gonna go right there to about 23.7. Shadows, we've definitely got room to add shadows here. That's going to primarily make the trees a little bit darker. So I'm gonna go down to right about -45 for that. I like that. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of contrast here just to kind of enhance those midtones. It really makes the snow and the tree pop from each other. I like how that looks. And for this one, I'm actually gonna back off on the whites a little bit because I want the sky to not be quite as bright. So I brought it down to about -13. And then I'm gonna go down on the blacks just a little bit here. I'm gonna go to about -5.8. If we do a reset here, this is what we started at. And this is where we're at now. So you can see it added a really nice bit of contrast there. Now for the appearance in the woods here, for the LUT, I'm gonna try my Classic Cinema first. So Classic Cinema, I kind of like how that looks. It's got that slightly green shadows and slightly red highlights the way I designed it. And I think that looks pretty cool there. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna undo that and I'm gonna try one other. I just wanna see how the cool look looks to this. So if you want that really cold forest scene, the cool look is definitely going to do that. But for this particular footage, I like the Classic Cinema better. So I'm gonna go back to that. And then final scene, my daughter sledding here. So first of all, if you look at this, you'll probably see right away, it definitely needs some exposure added back to it. So we're gonna add some exposure here. And this one I purposely underexposed quite a bit, just so you could see how much we can go up here if we need to. So I'm going up to like 1.5 here. And D-Log-M has still preserved a lot of those murky clouds in the sky. So D-Log-M has quite a bit of flexibility in this case. So as you can see here, our highlights are maxing out at about 80 right now. So we're gonna bring that up a little bit further. And then shadows, we're gonna bring those down just a little bit. The shadows here, you'll notice we have a little bit touching right here, and that represents my daughter's boots in this image. That's where those shadows are. So we're gonna be careful with the shadows, not bring them down too much. And then contrast, I'm gonna bump this up a little bit further, probably right there around 10.7. And then whites, we're gonna add just a little bit here. I wanna brighten that snow a little. And then blacks, we're gonna go down just slightly here. And blacks, even if I go to -0.3, it's too much. The boots do lose detail in them. So I'm gonna actually make it to 1 right there. And then for this particular one, I actually want to add a little bit of saturation. So I'm gonna go down here to creative, and I'm gonna drag saturation to the right a little bit. I really wanna make that green in the sled pop in my daughter's hat and jacket, because there's not a lot of color in the scene otherwise. So I'm gonna go to right about 120 right there. And then finally, I'm gonna add a LUT. So for this particular one, I think I wanna do the classic cinema. I'm gonna try that first. I actually like how the classic cinema looks here. That looks pretty cool. But let's say for the sake of this scene, let's say we wanna make it a little bit warmer, a little bit cheerier. I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna click warm. Now warm is going to be good if you have any of those tropical beach scenes. Warm is gonna feel really good on those. But I don't know how it's gonna go on this cold scene, so I'm gonna try it out and see. So warm, it just doesn't fit with the vibe of this. So I'm actually gonna take away warm, and I'm gonna go back to either deep cinema or classic cinema. Let's try deep, see how that looks. All right, so I'm kind of liking deep cinema for this one actually. Really like how that looks. So I'm gonna stick with deep cinema here. I'm gonna show you how to export to get the best quality footage that's gonna hold up on YouTube and still look good. So go to export right here, go to media. You can name your clip whatever you want here. I'm gonna name this Action 6 clip test. And then what we wanna do is we wanna go to video here. First of all, select H.264 for format. And then under the basic video settings, select render at maximum depth and use maximum render quality. You wanna have both of those selected. And down here where it says profile, you want to uncheck this. You want to go to high, and then you want to uncheck the level box, and you want to go to 5.2 right here. You can keep everything else the same until you get down here. For the bitrate encoding, you want to do continuous bitrate, which is CBR. And you want to go right here to target bitrate of 100. And then after you change those settings, you can select export, and it's going to export your clip. Those settings are going to get you the best looking footage when you upload this to YouTube. And you of course want the best looking footage. You want to have a good outcome after you've worked hard on grading all that footage. So if you own the Action 6 and you want to follow this process, make sure to download my free LUTs below. If you'd like to learn more about how to get the very best from the Action 6, including low light, time lapses, night lapses, and more, check out this playlist right here.